Coming to you from the mountains and the plains. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Altman.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance.
And now your hosts, Joe Altman and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire. A jam-packed 2-hour show today. We have a special guest to talk about talk about immigration. And then the second hour, we'll talk about the woke Super Bowl ads and impeachment. So it's going to be a really, really good hour. But before we dive into it, this episode of the Conservative Daily Podcast is sponsored by C-SPAN, live on C-SPAN 2, the historic second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, starting Tuesday, February 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Tune in for complete coverage of the Senate proceedings, beginning with opening arguments from both sides. The former president faces a charge of, quote, incitement of insurrection, end quote, for his role in the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Follow it all live and unfiltered on C-SPAN 2, online at cspan.org, or on the free C-SPAN radio app. So joining us today, a very special guest, the Senior National Security Fellow for the Center of Immigration Studies, Todd Bensman. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you are coming out with a new book. It's not out yet, but it's about to come out. Mr. Bruce, go ahead and put it on the screen. We got it? Yeah, we got it. America's Covert Border War. You warned me about it, and I still did it. America's Covert Border War, the Untold Story of the Nation's Battle to Prevent Jihadist Infiltration. You warned me not to say border wall. It rolls off the tongue. But we have a link in the description. Anyone who wants to pre-order the book, they can. Really glad to have you on the show. We've used your pieces a lot over the past year talking about this kind of issue. And it's really nice, Todd, to have you on the show to do a deep dive into the whole issue. Because when people think of the southern border, a lot of times they think about Central American, South American migrants, which mostly that's what happens at the border. But over the past decade, we've seen a pretty significant spike in migrants from the other hemisphere, whether it be Africa, Asia, or the Middle East. So why don't you give a brief synopsis of what the book's about, and then we'll go into a deep dive into the issue.
Sure, and thank you so much for the attention and for having me on, and especially for correcting its border war. I don't know why interviewers like to say wall, but probably because the wall is so much in the news right now. The book is about a topic that is and a threat issue at the border that is always controversial, always guaranteed to be contentious, to have right and left at each other's throats. This is about the prospect of terrorist infiltration over that border among Spanish-speaking migrants by travelers who are from places like Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, everywhere in the Middle East. And those are called countries of terrorism concern or countries of national security concern. Every year we have anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 that we know of that are apprehended from those countries. And it's a traffic that is not regarded as regular traffic. It's treated in a way that is in line with Homeland Security values. The book is about what the Homeland Security establishment does with that traffic, how they look at that traffic, the programs that have been in place to deal with that traffic, both at the actual physical border and throughout Latin America. And the news value to me of the book is really that nobody ever reports about these programs that are in place for a threat issue that theoretically doesn't exist, or is often said not to even exist, as a figment of conservative imaginations or Republican imaginations, doesn't exist. Remember, just a year and a half or so ago, President Trump, when he was trying to get funding for his wall, said that Middle Easterners were traveling with the caravans and that terrorists have been among those travelers that have actually reached the border. And the reaction was just stunning. I mean, it was this overwhelming pushback of, you're a liar, fact check after fact check after fact check, none of it's true. You're a liar again, and you can't prove it, and let's all just move along. And that lasted for about 2 or 3 months straight, that one. But the fact is that it is true that migration from those countries happens, as the president said.
Yeah.
And it is also true that jihadists and suspected terrorists have been in that traffic, have been caught south of the border, have been caught at the border. The way they have been caught is through these counterterrorism programs that are secret or hidden from public view, but they have been deployed for 15 years, in the years right after 9/11. And it really just, the book, America's Covert Border War, just systematically lays out what it is that the United States has been doing on that threat problem. And also what the threat problem is, what it actually is, not through the lens of either conservatives or Democrats, liberals, but through the lens of Homeland Security people who are dealing with this. And to me, that's apolitical, and it's nonpartisan. It's fundamentally nonpartisan. It's something that both Democrats and conservatives ought to worry about and care about. So that's kind of a quick elevator speech.
Yeah, well, you hit all the points. It always strikes me that the left, the media, however you want to define it, they always try, whenever Donald Trump would say something like that, they would immediately jump to, that's not true, let's figure out a way to argue it's not true. I mean, we've been worried about this for well over a decade. I mean, there were whole seasons of 24 with Jack Bauer, like centered around the notion of terrorists sneaking across the border. It's not like this is something that Donald Trump just made up out of thin air. This has been something that has really made people worry for a very long time, since 9/11. So you mentioned that they have arrested suspected terrorists just last week. Well, we want to make sure that we're very clear to say that not everyone who crosses the border from one of those terrorist suspected countries is a terrorist. There's different ways to classify them. But among the people who are coming into the United States from places like Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Africa, Southeast Asia, right? All those areas, they have caught people who have had suspected terrorist links. And do you have a number you could share with the audience of how many have been apprehended in recent years?
So the book describes, first of all, the book explains that a lot of the data about those numbers has always been behind a classified curtain of classification, which is a part of the problem, because if you can't, like when Trump was talking about this, people would come right out and say, prove it, show us, what are the numbers? And I know that he would have to balk at that, because then you would have to declassify material. But what I am able to say in the book is that every year we have about 20 migrants who are already on the terror watch lists that have been placed there by one of our agencies or by a foreign partner agency somewhere down the line, that somebody had reached a threshold where they could be put on the watch list, on one of our watch lists. And that in addition to the people that are already on watch lists, that those are just the ones that would be identified. So about 20 of those a year. There are an indeterminate number of others in addition to those each year that are apprehended. Now, there's a big difference between, so if I could just backtrack a second.
Sure.
There are two elements to the Covert Border War. The one element is what we do at the physical line, at the southern border. There are things that we do, the FBI, ICE intelligence officers, DIA, and other agencies are down there doing certain things. But then there's a complementary, bigger, really, in my opinion, more intriguing component operating in Latin America, and that's mostly Homeland Security Investigations, HSI.
Yeah.
ICE owns them, and they are down there battling the smuggling networks that are bringing people in from the Middle East. They're specialized kind of intercontinental smuggling organizations that we have been battling, have this like hidden battle going on for years and years. So what happens often is that in Latin America, we apprehend people who are suspected terrorists before they ever reach the border.
Mm-hmm.
And we do things with them. We deport them or we neutralize them in other ways.
Or send them off to a black site and they're never heard from again.
Well, as a matter of fact, there is a case described in my book of a Al-Qaeda operative who was apprehended in Mexico on his way to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to spend years in our terrorist holding facilities there because he was that bad. But guys like that wouldn't be counted in the 20 that actually reached the border. So it's the total numbers are not disclosed in the book because they're classified, but enough of it is to outline that there is in fact enough of a threat there that we have deployed programs, counterterrorism programs, and people, resources, funding, agencies across the intelligence community are deeply involved in this thing that supposedly doesn't exist except as a phantom in somebody's imagination.
Well, it's always been a game of percentages, right? A percentage of the people who come to the United States will reach the border. A percentage of them we know are from non-Central American, non-South American continents. A percentage of them we know will be terrorists. And a percentage of them we know we will have enough information at our disposal to suspect them of terrorism, right? So there's lots of these limiting factors along the line. And just because we capture someone that has a suspected tie for terrorism, I mean, I always have this argument with friends of mine who are on the left, who they claim, well, we only had X number of border crossers last year. Well, we actually don't know that because the number we have are the number who were apprehended. The idea that the federal government is apprehending every single one of them, no one could possibly believe that the government has a 100% success rate in apprehending border crossers. So we know that there are suspected terrorists crossing the border. It would also kind of be common sense to know that there are suspected terrorists crossing the border who are not being apprehended.
Right, and we have had cases where people with suspected or who actually were connected with Hezbollah, for example, later were arrested and prosecuted for terrorism crimes in the United States. We have had individuals who have been caught at the border with subsequently turned out that they had terrorism ties, not on any watch lists, who were prosecuted not for terrorism but for immigration fraud and other crimes. But in the court records, it is disclosed, like full bloom disclosed, what they were involved in and how long they had been involved with Al-Shabaab or there's really great detail that is in the public realm on this, but for various reasons that are both explainable or speculative and not explainable at all, U.S. media has never really covered any of this in a comprehensive way, which is, kind of one of the purposes of the book is to just take all of these disparate pieces and components of the public information and to put it all together in one place for a nice portrait of what's actually happening. And I would just point out that the numbers are, I mean, I would never say that terrorists are flooding over the border. And I don't hear a lot of even conservatives say that, although some of them have made claims that are that were wrong, which I don't think did the cause much good. But the numbers, and my first chapter is, the name of my first chapter is Small Numbers, Big Consequences, because it doesn't matter that the numbers are small. Remember that it was 19 hijackers that sent the United States to war in Afghanistan for 20 years, not to mention Iraq and all of the expenditure to keep the country safe. 19 guys. In Europe, I point out my entire chapter 1 is about the European theater and the European catastrophe that is still underway right now because of migrant border crossing terrorists who took advantage of this swell of migration that from the Middle East, from the same countries, over the European external border, the EU external border, and among them were ISIS terrorist cells deliberately deployed within that migrant traffic, and they conducted the Paris attacks, multiple suicide bombings, the Brussels attacks. All of the people involved in those came in as migrants, and there weren't very many of them, but the number of terrorists that crossed in with those mass migrant numbers, the volumes, might have been about 150 that we know of, compared to 3 million total. But they literally changed the face of Europe. You had elections that, I mean, the number and variety of permanent changes that befell Europe because of these few people are outlined in the book, but way too numerous for me to go into here. But like Brexit was the result of those terror attacks by those migrant border crossers, to name one. Leaders fell and new leaders replaced them, to name a second, over that issue. And the terrorism is still happening even now by migrants that are still coming in now, even though they supposedly have gotten it under control. So the small numbers is actually very concerning because it makes it harder to find them. And the consequences are vast from what they do.
The number that we always talk about on the show is 0. And that's the number of terrorists crossing our border that should be acceptable, right? That shouldn't be a debatable issue, right? Republicans and Democrats should both say that the number of terrorists crossing the border that we'll accept is 0. And you would think that the policies would go towards making that happen. But as you mentioned with Europe, there was this push to not appear racist, to not appear xenophobic, to welcome the migrant streams in, even if it meant bringing a few radicalized people. So I look at what's happening at the border, and I had hoped, and we had criticized Obama of this pretty heavily during his administration. You would have thought that he would have, if he didn't care about that particular issue, maybe he would care about Ebola. But we saw during the Ebola epidemic, the outbreak, that they were still allowing people from Ebola outbreak areas into the country without necessary testing, right? We saw just in the first week or two of Biden's administration, with all the focus he's putting on coronavirus, they're still letting people in. And there are allegations that they're being released without proper testing, without all the proper PPE to keep them safe. They're just being put on a bus, shipped to San Antonio, and best of luck to you, right? So it's always struck me that the number should be 0. The number of Ebola cases crossing the border should be 0. The number of terrorists crossing the border should be 0. The number of COVID cases crossing should be 0. But when it comes to Democrat governance, it always feels like they have a number that's greater than 0, because they're more fearful of being portrayed as xenophobic or racist than they are to actually do things that we all know would keep people safe.
Well, I remember during the Donald Trump, when he was making his claims about terrorist border crossings, during that pushback, that epic pushback by the institutional media, the traditional legacy media, one of the stories came out at NBC, and I actually cite that in my book, came out where they were able to get through sources that 6 terrorists had crossed the border in 2019 or 2018, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the NBC story put it was that it was only 6.
Yeah,
so they put this adverb in front of that. And as I point out in the book when I recount that anecdote, that, you know, there were 6, amazingly, there were 6, terrifyingly, 6 came across, according to just this one NBC report. You don't want 6 terrorists crossing your southern border ever.
No.
And you certainly to characterize it as to put only in front of it, really kind of it exposes a terrible kind of bias about this, and the politicization of what really ought to just be a homeland security matter, like drug smuggling or sex trafficking, or
Well, I wonder what number. I wonder what number it would have to get to for them to remove that qualifier, to remove only from the sentence. Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 50? Is it 100? I mean, that's what I mean. It should be 0. And if we're gonna have an argument about policy that just at its base just presumes a non-zero number, then they should have to just tell us what the number is. What is the number of acceptable terrorists crossing the border? What is the number of acceptable drunk drivers, right? How many Americans are going to have to get hit head on by a drunk driver, which we've all heard and read the cases, they happen every year. How many drunk drivers do we have to let in? How many Americans do we have to sacrifice at the altar of political correctness and wokeness, right? It should be a 0 number, but they're always treated like there's some kind of protected class. Like entering the country illegally is a protected class, and it doesn't matter if they gave material support to terrorists in the past, right? It doesn't matter. You have to let them in because that's what being a woke country is all about. There's not a question there. I'm stunned by this idea that, oh, well, if there's a drunk driver gets in, well, there's American drunk drivers, so that's just what we have to live with. Well, no, someone got killed because someone was driving drunk, who had a history of driving drunk and had no right to be here, right? That's just one subset of the population, right? But it should be a 0 number. The number of acceptable terrorists should be 0. And the fact that Joe Biden's first day in office, he signed an executive order stating that he believed it was in the national security interest of the United States to rescind an executive order to screen potential terrorists, right? If you actually read the language of his executive order, he says it is in the national security interest of America not to prevent terrorists from entering the United States. I mean, part of that's Donald Trump titling the executive order that way. But it's just, if that's not in the national security interest, I don't know what is. And it's just incredibly frustrating. Again, there's not a question there. I'm just, the more you're talking, the more frustrated I'm getting, because it just seems so common sense, but also so bogged down in partisanship.
Well, I mean, I would point out that the kind of messaging that we're hearing out of the from the Democratic Party during the primary campaign season, when you had all of them up on the debate stage talking about, which one of them was going to be more welcoming, who was the most open to, who is going to outdo the others the most, and then when Biden actually became the nominee and was kind of parroting all of that, this struck me as very, very similar. I would say almost the same as the ideology that we were hearing from Angela Merkel in Germany in 2015 as the mass migration was swelling over there on their borders. And then followed by the French and the Swedish and the Finns and everybody else in Europe were speaking the same way, the same language of we're letting everyone in, and we have these values and these humanitarian motivations, and they ruled the day within a couple of months. They were all of them were, but it was too late. They had already opened the sluice box, and I think that, I'm seeing a lot of very close parallels. My entire chapter 1 deals with what the European catastrophe and the political ideology, I would say almost like a religion, that preceded what happened there, the catastrophe that is still going on in Europe. And I really just feel like, what's happening now on the southern border, we're starting to see it with, greater numbers of surging migrants who just acted as camouflage for the European tragedy that we're starting to see. I mean, the parallels are a little bit nerve-wracking for me, and I hope I'm just wrong about all of it.
Yeah. Oh, we all hope we're wrong.
But I just, I'm seeing the same ideology and hearing the same ideology that preceded that catastrophe over there. Like, we learned nothing from Paris and Brussels.
Oh, we did. We learned a lot. I mean, that got Donald Trump elected. Like, what's been stunning to me is how fast Democrats, the left, the media, have gone from Joe Biden's victory into saying, well, Joe Biden won. That means everything that got Donald Trump elected was racism, right, or xenophobia. We're just undoing it all. When Donald Trump, when he brought those angel moms up on stage to tell the stories about their loved ones who were killed tragically by illegal aliens, that was a real issue. That's a real issue for a lot of Americans. And it's a heartbreaking issue to hear the stories they tell. This idea that, oh, well, Donald Trump lost, so that means angel moms are no longer important. It's just the speed at which they have just revoked everything designed to prevent those kinds of tragedies has been stunning. And the result is a humanitarian crisis. I mean, beyond that, yes, there are terrorists crossing the border. We know that. We all know that. We're also radicalizing people because they're being mistreated or they're unhappy with it. It's not only the terrorists that we have to worry about. It's also the people coming in and being further radicalized. I mean, this sticks out to me. Mr. Producer, put up my screen. This happened in 2019. There was a bunch of African migrants who were just dropped off in San Antonio. I live in the San Antonio area. So they were just dropped off in San Antonio. They didn't speak Spanish. They didn't speak English. They spoke French and apparently other languages. And we had no translators here in San Antonio to deal with them. We just left them there. And they were left to sit outside in 100-degree heat until someone in the bureaucracy figured it out. Now, that's horrible what happened to them. They shouldn't be in the country. Definitionally, they shouldn't be here. But when you see how people are treated once they get here, it's not saying that they should all get a house and a job, right? But it isn't all that surprising that someone treated like that could be further radicalized, right? Like, oh, wow, they don't want me here. I mean, it's just, I see it, and none of this makes any sense. None of it makes sense to just take a bunch of African migrants and dump them into a Texas city and just say, okay, Texas, work it out, right? It's just, you see that they move them north, they move them into major cities, and they say just work it out, and then they act surprised when people commit crimes, when people hurt people, right? When people go down the path towards extremism. It just seems so obvious that not just the terrorists coming in, but even people who have no terrorist ties whatsoever, we have the right to vet these people. And yeah, we might not be able to look into their heart and to know what their true intentions are, but we have the right to vet them. And the idea that we shouldn't vet anyone, we should just let them all in, again, don't act surprised if we let in people with bad intentions. It's just, it's so frustrating because I live there. I live here.
Yeah, I know. I'm not too far from you. I'm in Austin.
My condolences.
I'll tell you this. I'm in Williamson County. It's red up here, or it was. I don't know if it is anymore. But in any case, regarding the Africans, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico and Central America, and have met a lot of those Africans and interviewed them, and spent a lot of time with migrants. Doing my job requires that I kind of know what's going on firsthand in my reading of it. And the issue that you raise about vetting, I think, is just not raised often enough. That you have to remember that that these people are coming from countries that are filled with rampaging militias that have done unspeakable atrocities to each other, and they're warlords, and there are people that have a lot of blood on their hands in those countries. They're also their victims. We like to presume that the people that are on the streets in San Antonio, dropped at the bus station, are all victims. But I met a lot of military-age guys from the Congolese, and from Ghana, and from a couple of other Central African places, and I don't know which side they were on is the problem. And, you know, if you just wave them through without really any vetting, which is what happened in 2019, and it's happening again now, we're going to see years of this, that we're importing people who potentially are war criminals. I'm not saying they're all war criminals. I'm saying that we owe that to our people, to make sure that somebody coming from a country with rampaging tribal militias everywhere, with multiple sides of conflicts, where everybody's committing terrible atrocities against one another and against each other's tribes, that we know full well who we're letting in the country without just putting them in a bus depot.
And just send them into the country. We're speaking with Todd Bensman. Mr. Producer, go ahead and put the book up on the screen again. Author of the new book, and I'm going to say it right this time, America's Covert Border War, The Untold Story of the Nation's Battle to Prevent Jihadist Infiltration. Link in the description if you want to pick up the book, pre-order it. Great time to remind everyone, hit that share button on Facebook if you haven't already. If they're playing games with our account again on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you're watching us on DLive, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that follow button. You mentioned, Todd, about vetting. And a lot of times, yes, we need to vet people. But the old saying is very true in this scenario. You cannot draw water from a rock. Just having a vetting infrastructure in place doesn't matter if, for example, you are calling into some kind of government office in Somalia that isn't even staffed, right? People look at Somalia. Somalia is a failed state. The government in Somalia does not control its entire territory. They, as you mentioned, they have warlords. They have different tribes control different areas. There is no central database telling us who everyone is, right, with their real identities and their criminal histories. So when Donald Trump signed his executive order, his travel bans, it was borrowing that logic that was actually implemented first by the Obama administration. The idea that countries that hate us, or countries that cannot be trusted to accurately help us vet people, right, should not just be waved through as a priority. So yes, we should vet these people. Absolutely. Everyone should be vetted entering the country. We owe that to the American people to vet them. But just vetting them doesn't change the fact that if they pick up the phone and they call someone in the Congo, one, we have no reason to believe that the information they'll give is accurate. And two, we might not even get anyone on the other end. So it's complicated. We have to vet, but in cases where we can't vet anyone, this idea that we're just going to let them in anyway, as opposed to Donald Trump's measure, which was restrict immigration from those areas, again, it seems like the acceptable number of terrorist criminals is a non-zero number, which is not in the best interest of the American people at all.
Well, it seems like you framed that issue in a way that I never see people frame that issue. It's absolutely correct. I don't think the American people really fully understand or ever understood the purpose of Trump's so-called travel ban. It was never a Muslim travel ban, by the way, but it was a travel restrictions ban that ultimately expanded to 13 countries. And the reason why those 13 countries are on that travel ban list, and that means like we're not going to issue visas to Libya, anybody from Libya or Somalia, is for exactly the reason you just described, that there's no system in place, there's no government often, there's no records, there's no database. These are pre-modern countries most of the time that don't even have governments. that our American adjudicators can pick up the phone or hit an email to and say, hey, can you check on this guy for us, see what's in your intel database. They don't have an intel database. A place like Somalia never even issued birth certificates after 1991 or driver's licenses or marriage certificates, nothing. People just were born and died, and there was just no government. And the databases that the records that they had before 1991, a militia went in there and destroyed them all. So there was just nothing ever. So the reason Somalia was on that list is because we can't vet anybody from those countries. Libya, the same thing, and Yemen. All of those countries are just in states of anarchy or are so pre-modern that you can't get an intel share from anyone.
Well, Syria jumps out to me. Syria jumps out to me because there are areas in the country where, as you explain, are pre-modern, where they had a functioning government. They had the Assad regime, right? They had that government that had relatively good record keeping. But if a bomb just detonated in the government records office, you're not going to be able to vet the person in that area of the country. And let's suppose that the American adjudicator calls up the Assad regime and says, hey, sorry about the bombs we just dropped on you. We really need your help making sure that the terrorists who are trying to kill you don't also come here and try and kill us. Can you verify whether this person is a terrorist? On the other end, the Assad regime is saying, wait a minute, we have a chance to get this terrorist out of our country and actually to force them on the country that's trying to kill us? There's no rational person who would possibly look at that and say, yeah, we can trust the Assad regime to make sure terrorists don't come to the United States. Because it's a win-win for them. They get rid of them and they force them on us.
And keep in mind that even in the best of times, we were diplomatically estranged from the Syrians. Yeah. They would never have helped us if we, no matter how desperate we were for their help, they would not help us. They would enjoy it. And so the point is that when Biden just eliminated, I think that was the first thing he did, one of his very first acts, without any thought to what we were going to do as a replacement strategy. People like me and people in Homeland Security were thinking we're in trouble because it's only a matter of time before people start coming in with visas from Libya and Somalia and the rest and get into terrorism trouble. I've documented very well, I think for CIS, I've written a number of articles pointing out case after case of people from those very countries pre-ban who came here and got into terrorism trouble, including one who conducted a jihadist terror attack on Ohio State University just a few years ago, maybe the year before the ban. So I think for sure that is going to be on the Biden administration's shoulders. Nobody's talking about this. Nobody's saying out loud, except a very few of us, what you just said, which is that this is a massive vetting problem, and we've returned to it without any thought. I like thoughtfulness.
Well, the American people deserve thoughtfulness, especially when the consequence is a terrorist or a criminal or a mass murderer or a genocidaire entering the country without any vetting. I remember reading, before we jump off of Syria, I remember reading a report that ISIS had actually captured a records office, and they were issuing people fake IDs with fake names, fake pictures. Basically, not a fake ID. It's taking someone that they know is dead and giving that identity to someone else. Like, no, we cannot let anyone into the country if they're holding an ID that was issued by an office that was at any time under ISIS's control. Like, no, you can't just, it seems like it's a common sense thing. But again, common sense eludes these people because we have to make sure that we do what's in the best interest of the woke agenda. Well, you just got back from the border wall area and you were there on the last day of construction. What did you see? Talk a little bit about it. Paint the picture of what it looked like for the border wall construction to wind down on that final day?
The last day of wall construction was Wednesday before last by presidential proclamation. So I was in El Paso, and I traveled to 75 miles west into New Mexico, where there was a stretch of wall that had been under construction going east, and about a mile and a quarter away, a stretch going west and east, and they were supposed to kind of meet together and suture up that area. Probably would have taken another month or so. So I went to that location, and I got there just in time for heavy equipment operators to be getting into their gigantic earth-moving machines and kind of trundling off of the pads to the one after another to the road that is right along the border wall, the access road, and I just kind of watched them at 2 miles an hour just sort of disappear into the distance. And at the wall itself was the final trench for the next panel that didn't go in. And it was all quiet, and what was left there where the wall was supposed to go was a vehicle barrier that looks kind of like a Normandy Day beach.
Yeah.
Those big,
like a tank barricade.
Yeah,
almost.
Something like that. But
Yeah.
people can just and I jumped right up back and forth. I mean, it's no big deal to cross that thing. That's what's left of a mile stretch between that part of the wall and the other part of the wall. So we have a
video
corridor.
We have a video that we pulled off of your Twitter. Do you want to plug who took the video? Because I didn't write that down. We have an aerial video of a drone footage showing our viewers just what it looks like. You want to set the video up?
Yeah, that would be Chuck Holton. Is a journalist that I was traveling with that day, and he shared his drone video with me and said I could use it. So,
Mr. Producer, let's go to cut 0. Let's show everyone what Todd is talking about. This is drone footage from that area of the border wall construction. Mr. Producer, do we have cut 0? Border wall construction, you can see that's the vehicle barrier, and then it goes right up against the massive, that's 16, 20 plus feet tall pedestrian wall. So this is mainly just meant to impede trucks. So it really is stunning how, I'm surprised they even put the vehicle barriers up, right? I mean, at least kudos to them for doing that. But
those are from an earlier time.
Yeah. So you mentioned being able to jump over. Yes, there's footage. I don't have it, but I've seen children like as young as 6 years old climbing through that. It's not designed to stop pedestrians. I mean, no matter what age you are, if you can move, a toddler could get through it if you gave them enough time. I also have an image just to hammer it home. This is not that specific section of the border, but go ahead, put up my screen, Mr. Producer, of what it looks like when the pedestrian wall ends and vehicle barriers just begin. It's abrupt. There's really no transition. And it tells anyone who wants to illegally cross the border that all you have to do is walk a couple more miles along the wall, and you'll get to a point where you can hop over. Why risk climbing over the top and breaking your leg if you can just walk to the end? So that section that you were at, we can take that down, Mr. Producer. That section you were at was to close off an area that was known for smuggling, correct?
Correct. And now there's about a mile and a quarter gap there. I interviewed Border Patrol agents all along the wall for over a period of 4 days while they were on patrol, while they were working under the shadow of it. And the Border Patrol, in my opinion, those are the only true experts about the wall. There are lots of people in Washington and maybe even Austin who think that they're experts about the wall and what works and how the wall doesn't work. But if you're spending your 40 right there under it, and your every day is affected by it in different ways. And those guys told me, and I wrote a piece about this for CIS, about the Border Patrol agents that I talked to and what they think about this. And all of them are incredibly demoralized. The ones that I spoke to about that the wall stopped because it had made their lives and their jobs fairly easy, because where the wall went up, everywhere the wall went up, activity dropped to 95%. There just was almost no activity. Occasionally, people would rope over the top or bring a 40-foot ladder or do something like that, but those numbers of the people that do that are minuscule compared to, whole families coming through with grandma and grandpa and the children, and that just doesn't happen with that wall like that. Even the drug smugglers. So what we did was effectively give them the workaround. We left workarounds everywhere. And the Border Patrol.
And those contracts were already paid. Those contracts were already paid. The government likely isn't going to get that money back. They just said, we don't want you to finish. We don't want you to finish this section. Everything's already been bought and paid for. We just don't want you to finish it. We would prefer if this section was left open. I mean, it's almost to the point, we have some new sections of border wall, and where they were able to close up those gaps, that's great. But in a section like that where you just described, the border wall there it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless if you can just walk around it.
You've wasted your investment by just not closing it up. Just close it up. At least then you can force the traffic much further down the road and maybe manage it over there a little bit better. But to leave these gaps is just confounding. I'll mention this other thing that reminds me that another thing that I saw out there was that there were staging areas, construction and equipment that would be, trucked to the wall as it got built, that are just left behind. And when you go, and I drove all around one of them. It was a vast site, not right there, but it was closer to El Paso. And there I saw 10 to 15 foot high stacks of wall panel.
And they're not going to take
acres and acres. I mean, it must have been, 30, 40, 50 acres of 15 foot high stacks jammed tight together. Like you could walk on top of them. They were so tightly packed. And, I don't know what the value was or but I can tell you this, that to move them anywhere, they're out in the middle of the desert. To get rid of them or move them or dispose of them, it's just going to be millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to move all that stuff out of there. And then what do you do with it? Nobody's talking about the material that was left out there and what's going to become of it. It was just probably the most striking thing about being out at the wall on the day construction stopped was just, what are they going to do with all this stuff out here? It was just vast.
Well, knowing Biden, he'll probably throw it into the ocean. He'll probably throw it into the ocean to create a coral reef. You mentioned that at the end of the wall that they just had a trench dug for the next section. They'll never be filled. If they don't fill that, if they don't actually make it so it's filled, the next time they get heavy rains in that area, it will compromise the foundation of the next border wall section, because there'll just be water in a big trench and it'll completely compromise that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that next section of border wall topples over. I mean, you have to finish the job. If you don't finish the foundation of that wall, as soon as there's even a little bit of water in there, you're going to see movement, soil movement. And it's just, at this point, take the wall down, right? If you're not going to finish it, if you're not going to make it so it doesn't fall down, take it down. Just take it down so it doesn't fall on someone. I don't know.
Well, I'm in contact with, there's 12 major construction companies that were doing the wall, the big 12. And I'm in contact with the CEO of one of them, who I won't name. They just don't want that right now for obvious reasons. But I'm getting updates about so what now? What's going to happen now? And what they're telling me is that they are supposed to begin some sort of negotiations with the federal government about several key issues, one of which is, are they going to litigate for breach of contract, because there is a breach of contract without the causes that are in the contract, they could litigate this. Are they going to just get paid to go away? They could just get paid to go away. We'll fill out your contract and you can, leave us alone. Maybe putting up some of it, filling in trenches, securing it for the long haul, to do things like what you're talking about might be in the offing, so a little bit more work. To finishing putting up all the panels that are still out there, which I rule out. I can't imagine politically that a photograph or a video of one panel of wall going up under the Biden administration would ever happen. So those are and this particular CEO said, we have never been in any situation like this. There's no experience for it. We have no idea. We are in completely uncharted territory on a major construction project like this, financially, legally, and with the material and every other which way. So I'm also not seeing any media coverage asking those questions. Those are important questions. Those are public policy questions that need to be investigated.
When the people from We Built the Wall built a wall that started toppling over a little bit, that got nationwide coverage. But the idea that a trench left open could ultimately lead to that wall toppling over and legitimately hurt someone, right? If the wall just was to fall over at any moment, it could hurt someone. It could hurt one of the beloved turtles that I keep hearing about in that area. Like it's a big deal. It could hurt the butterflies in the butterfly sanctuary. That is absolutely certain. Two more questions before we round out the hour. I've been looking for it. I haven't seen anything, and maybe you know it. Maybe they just haven't decided yet because again they're acting before they think. Is there a policy for what happens if the wall gets damaged? So if someone cuts a hole in the border wall, which has happened a couple times, right, or destroys a section to bust through, has the Biden administration decided what they're going to do? Are they going to fix it, or are they just going to leave it as is until it crumbles and falls to the ground?
Great question, and I don't know. I know that when Trump was in office, when things would happen like that, there were cutting tools brought to the wall and some sections cut out. They would just immediately repair. They'd rush to the site and repair it. But it is a good question. What happens the next time somebody cuts through that thing? Are they just would the Biden administration actually just leave it and just say, well, it'll make it even easier for people to get through?
Yeah. We wouldn't want someone to have a work site injury. We wouldn't want someone to use power tools and potentially injure themselves. So in the interest of humanitarianism, we're going to leave the hole where it is. And we're going to also situate a bunch of water bottles right next to it so that when they get through, they can be fully hydrated. Last question before we let you go, and an excellent guest. Again, put the book up on the screen, Mr. Producer, again. America's Covert Border War, the Untold Story of the Nation's Battle to Prevent Jihadist Infiltration. The last question I have, you mentioned this, and I hadn't even seen this because there's so much going on. The impeachment trial starts tomorrow. I didn't even see this, and I'm mad because I usually am all on this. In the Yuma sector, put up my screen, Mr. Producer, in the Yuma sector, Border Patrol agents arrested a group of 11 Iranian citizens who had crossed the border into the United States. You mentioned that. What can you tell us about that group? What are you hearing from your sources about that group?
All right. Well, first of all, it's not that unusual for Iranians to cross the border. There are routes that move people from Iran to the southern border through Brazil, Ecuador first, and then through Panama. So for maybe the majority of Americans, they get surprised by the fact that Iranians show up. But there is an American covert border war that we know about now that was created to deal with that exact situation. So what will happen with those 11? First of all, the border war that I talk about has a component that is hunting the smuggling organizations that bring Iranians and people from all of those countries to the border. And just in September, they broke up a major Iranian smuggling ring in Brazil with the Brazilians. I wrote about it. I think I was the only one in the United States who wrote about it. But there is an effort to break up the smuggling rings that made it possible for those 11 to get here. But clearly, something rose in its place. They're moving again. My sources tell me that there are more Iranians coming, a lot more. These 11 are just the first ones to show up in a while. The other part of the border war, covert border war, is that there are going to be FBI. They probably have been there in the detention facilities for a week now, for sure, and since there's 11 of them. Probably the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, ICE intelligence officers will be there, and possibly the CIA as well. And what they're doing is they're trying to assess, and might have been government agents that have been sent over here to either do so. Remember Soleimani, the Al-Quds Force general we assassinated in about a year ago. The Iranians have been swearing up and down that they are going to retaliate sooner or later for that. So that's in the back of everybody's minds when it comes to Iranians showing up at the border. They have to rule them out as being anything like that. So they are going to interrogate, phone dumps, investigate to the extent they can't call the Iranians because we're diplomatically estranged. Iran was on the travel ban list for a reason. And there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes that you will never know about. And if they're clear, they'll probably be allowed to. I mean, if the Homeland Security people that I just mentioned feel like they're not lying, there's no deception, that their stories kind of mix, that some of them are women, so maybe they're mothers or something like that, they'll be allowed to pursue an asylum claim, and they'll be duly brought into the country. But if they're not, then that leads to a whole other thing that goes to the heart of this thing. I mean, what we're looking for with Iranians are Hezbollah operatives, espionage spies who are coming in here to do something, or actual Quds operatives that are coming to do retaliation for, or they're just benevolent migrants who are victims of those people who just are trying to get asylum here. Either way, the job of the American Covert Border Warriors is to figure all that out and do it fast. And they're doing it. I promise you they're doing it right now.
One quick question before I know I said that was the last question, but the last question before we let you go. In all of the research you've done, what is the most shocking example that's stuck out to you of where someone was coming from as they crossed the border? What country did you see? I know that they say that they come from all over, but what was the moment where you saw something and you were just shocked to see that Border Patrol at the U.S.-Mexico border were apprehending someone from that country?
Well, I've seen a lot of those migrants en route and photographed and videotaped them, including Iranians. I met 4 Iranians as they and I were traveling in Costa Rica, and lots of Pakistanis and Afghanis and that sort of thing, Somalis. But one thing that, an episode that happened, we haven't had a terror attack on U.S. soil yet. A fact that I attribute to the covert border war that's been going on. We've caught quite a few of these guys and took them offline. I think that they deserve their due credit now too. Is one of them was a Somali who came across the Mexico-California border and made his way on up to the Canadian border and became a refugee there. And in 2017, he conducted a double vehicle ramming attack in Edmonton, Alberta, that it severely injured, tried to stab a police officer to death, and ran over 4 just pedestrians with 2 different vehicles. Wow. Was caught and prosecuted in Canada, and nobody has ever questioned how we barely missed that. We barely missed that bullet, and the first one that comes through and actually hits Are we going to all act surprised that we didn't know that this was a possibility? But that case, I think what bothers me the most about it is the lack of the general absence of any inquiry about how he traveled here, how he crossed the border, how he got in. Trey Gowdy, former lawmaker, actually is the only one who asked DHS OIG for a full investigation on how he traveled here and how he got in, and went on to Canada to conduct an ISIS attack, and nothing. I mean, 2 years later, nothing. I write about that case. There are a lot of cases like that in my book where there was one where there was a vehicle chase in Laredo, had a terrorist suspect on board, Somali. Vehicle crashed in this police chase, and they took him into custody. Lots of cases that are very interesting that have never been disclosed before, talked about in my book.
Well, again, we thank you so much for joining us for this hour. Again, Mr. Bruce, put up the image of the book again. If you want to pre-order Todd's new book, America's Covert Border War, The Untold Story of the Nation's Battle to Prevent Jihadist Infiltration, we have a link to do that on Amazon, or I guess they can buy it anywhere books are sold.
Yeah,
if they don't want to support Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. There are plenty of places to buy it, and I appreciate your support and mentioning it.
Well, thank you so much, Todd. Really do appreciate it, and I'd love to have you on again to talk about these issues, because with everything going on, it's so easy to lose track of the fact that the border is now, for all intents and purposes, wide open again. So thank you so much, Todd, for joining us. Really do appreciate it. We will be back on the other side of a break. Joe will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about the woke Super Bowl ads and a precursor, or a little warning about what's going to happen tomorrow as the impeachment trial begins. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the other side of this quick break.
Ronald Reagan famously said that our freedoms are never more than a generation away from extinction. Conservative Daily exists to make sure that never happens. With our community of 700,000 members, we fight every day to hold Congress's feet to the fire and stop them from surrendering our rights and freedoms. The fight to take this country back is not over. Please join our movement right now by going to conservative-daily.com and clicking the subscribe button to sign up for our free call to action newsletters. We have a chance to save this country, but only if we all work together. Again, this is conservative-daily.com, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the top. Ladies and gentlemen, the Conservative Daily Podcast is back. And now your host, Max McGuire.
And welcome back to Hour 2 of the Conservative Daily Podcast. In that first hour, we had Todd Bensman, our guest from the Center of Immigration Studies, spending the hour talking about his book, talking about the new developments at the border wall. So if you're just joining us now, definitely recommend you go back and listen. I thought it was a very good interview. I enjoyed it. It was funny at the start. He would say, well, if we don't have time, if we start running out of things to talk about, he started suggesting topics. That is one thing I promise anyone who comes on this show as a guest for a whole hour. I promise that I will have enough to talk about for that entire hour. I am not someone who is ever at a loss for words. But going into this next hour, did anyone watch the Super Bowl? I watched it. And I swore off the NFL, but my in-laws are in town, and I watched it. And I actually ditched cable. I now have a little antenna that sits on my TV. And the main reason I was ditching football is because I didn't want to give them the ratings. So when I had cable, I didn't want to give them the ratings. But interestingly enough, if you have an antenna, unless you're one of the 15 or some odd thousand homes that's actually contracted through Nielsen, if you watch something through an antenna, you don't tend to be recorded in the overall numbers anymore. They have a group of, I think, 15,000 antenna households over the entire country, and they use those to extrapolate and guess how many people actually watch each program. So knowing that, I was like, okay, well, we'll watch it. In-laws are in town. Have a nice little Super Bowl party. Give Fauci the finger and invite people over to watch the Super Bowl. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. And this is what we posted. What we posted on social media yesterday. Some people were like shocked we said it. I don't know. It felt like a real comment. Imagine that you are an alien. Imagine you're an alien. You've never been to the United States before. You've never seen, you know nothing about the United States of America. And the only exposure to American life, the American people, the only exposure you had was to watch the pregame, the commercials, and the game coverage and the halftime show. If that was your only exposure to American life, what would your guess be as to what percentage of the American population African Americans make up? Now, the truth is African Americans make up between 13 and 14% of the United States. But if you didn't know that, and you watched the Super Bowl and the pregame coverage, right, and the commercials, and the halftime show, you would believe that it was much higher. And that's fine. Listen, it's not a problem. I don't have a problem with it. I just think it's very interesting. You look historically at Super Bowl ads. The Super Bowl ads were geared towards the demographic that they wanted to sell to, right? The Budweiser frogs, just saying Budweiser, that was geared towards men who laughed at stupid jokes, right? And would buy more beer. Notice how there wasn't a whole lot of beer commercials yesterday? The demographics of the NFL's audience haven't changed, right? The demographics are still 25 to 49-year-old white families. That's still their main demographic for advertising. And yet yesterday, the advertisers just completely, not completely, I mean, there was the Matthew McConaughey commercial with the 3D Doritos, which got me very excited because I love 3D Doritos. I loved them when I was a kid, and I thought that was a really well-done commercial. But other than a couple of exceptions, like instead of gearing towards the actual audience, it seems like the advertising executives, the marketing managers, are creating the ads that for the demographic that they wish exist. Does that make sense? Instead of actually trying to make the company money, it was just trying to shove wokeness down our throats. And it wasn't uncomfortable because, listen, I don't care. I don't care if companies want to do that. I think that there are going to be a couple of companies that are going to receive a really significant backlash. We'll play some of their ads in a second. Yeah, Deanna said no Clydesdales. I didn't see a Clydesdale. Maybe I missed it. There didn't seem like there were any Clydesdales. Didn't seem like there was any
Max. No, they
Light,
didn't
stupid
play
jokes.
that commercial. They did not play that commercial yesterday. In fact, they purposely pulled it because it was the first time. Indeed, that was the first time since 1988 or 84 that they didn't have a Clydesdale commercial. And
wow,
there was yesterday's Super Bowl for commercials was unprecedented for the amount of normal clientele that played spots who didn't. So there was a lot of firsts yesterday. A lot of firsts.
Well, it makes sense, but why, of all years, when people are just sitting at home, a lot more time sitting at home, drinking a lot more, like it's not like Bud Light and Budweiser and Coors Light and all these companies are hurting for ad dollars, right? Why would they just abandon it? At least in my mind, maybe someone disagrees. Our call-in number, we put the call-in number back up now, 888-441-1121. Maybe someone else has another opinion. It's just they didn't want to actually advertise to the demographic that is watching the Super Bowl, right? They're not trying to sell beer. They're not trying to sell GoDaddy, right? They're not trying to sell all the things that you think back geared towards men, beer-drinking men who watch football, who are spending money. No, this was shoving wokeness down your throats. And it's fine. I mean, I'm going to go out of my way not to buy things from some of these companies that just decide to go on the wokeness. But even beyond that, they're not advertising to their demographic. It just makes me very frustrated. But before we even get to the ads, did you know that the so-called president, the asterisk president, gave an interview in the beginning? Did everyone know that? I watched the whole thing because I wanted to be able to do this today, to talk about how crazy and it was. Joe Biden, asterisk, gave an interview with CBS, and right out the gate, he makes it partisan. Right out the gate, He says it's Donald Trump's fault. Let's play this first part of that interview where Joe Biden accuses Trump of lost time. Let's play cut number 1.
Do you think a year from now there will be a Super Bowl where they can play in front of a full stadium?
It's my hope and expectation if we're able to put it together and make up for all the lost time fighting COVID.
All the lost time fighting COVID. Revisionist history. I mean, we just watched revisionist history take place right in front of us, pretending that the Trump administration did nothing to fight back a respiratory virus. Whether or not you believe the government has that role, should have that role, or even can win that fight against a respiratory virus. To claim that the Donald Trump administration didn't even try, beyond insulting. But he doesn't stop there. He then blames Donald Trump for the reason that we don't have enough vaccines. Let's play cut number 2.
People want to know when things are going to get back to normal.
Yep.
And the road ahead is pretty daunting. To get herd immunity, Dr. Fauci has said you have to have at least 75% of Americans vaccinated. We did the math, and at the current rate
Pause
of
it.
1.3 million.
Fact check. Herd immunity does not require pure vaccinations. You also reach herd immunity by people having natural antibodies. That's something that it's a really hard topic to talk about because that requires a lot of people to die. So that calculation that she makes where we need X number of vaccines in order to get there, it kind of ignores the fact that by the administration's own numbers, there are a lot of people who have already contracted the disease and therefore have some amount of immunity to it. So if you had to fact check that, CBS, you got to do better. Okay, keep playing.
Doses a day. It's going to take almost a year to get there. Can we wait that long?
No, we can't. That's why one of the disappointments was when we came into office is the circumstance relating to how the administration was handling COVID was even more dire than we thought.
The Trump administration.
The Trump administration. We thought they indicated there was a lot more vaccine available, and it didn't turn out to be the case.
Didn't turn out to be the case. Joe Biden, on the campaign trail, argued against a fast rollout of the vaccine. He wanted the companies to take longer developing the vaccine because he was terrified that Donald Trump would get the first shot into someone's arm before the election. So during the campaign, not only did Joe Biden ask the companies to slow down, but even before, he said it wouldn't be possible to have a vaccine. That all the experts say a vaccine is a year or 2 years away. That was his argument then. And when we finally had a vaccine coming, he told them, well, no, pump the brakes, hold up, we need to go slower. Now that he's in office, having a vaccine that was developed in record time, faster than anyone could have possibly hoped, his new argument is that we don't have enough of it. It's Donald Trump's fault. Forget about the fact that Donald Trump just gave us a vaccine faster than any other administration ever could have. Now, he didn't give us enough doses, and therefore it's his fault. Therefore, it is his fault. We posted on Facebook, it wasn't my finest moment, but I called him a POS because he is. For Joe Biden to go out on camera in his Super Bowl interview and to immediately, right out the gate, become partisan like that and accuse the former president as being responsible for the fact that there aren't enough vaccines to go around for everyone, when he himself didn't want the vaccines to be released yet. It's such a POS thing to do. And no, I'm not talking about a point of sale machine, anyone who works retail. I'm not talking about the cash registers that you check out at. The other acronym for POS. We're waiting on Joe to get here. Joe should be joining us shortly. I just talked to him before we went live in the first hour. Mr. Producer, see if you can get a hold of him. I don't want to jump through too many of these without him present because I know he's going to have a lot to say on them. But let's start with this next clip. This was not from the game. It was not from a commercial. It was part of CBS's coverage leading into the game. And CBS produced a video explaining the history of African Americans in the NFL. And as they correctly stated, the NFL started integrated It didn't start as an all-white league. It started with white Americans and black Americans and every race playing together. At one point, it became an all-white league. I want to show you how CBS depicted this decision. And I want to ask you whether or not this brings the country together or drives us further apart. Let's go ahead and play cut number 3.
Despite his success, progress was slow. There'd only been 13 black players since the league was started, and things were about to get worse. In the midst of the Great Depression, league owners met secretly to discuss their growing league and the Negroes' place in it. They decided that these colored boys were bad for business. Call it what you want, but this gentleman's agreement made it clear as day. Blacks were not allowed to play in their league anymore. Period.
Pause it. So she says, call it what you will, because those aren't quotes. What she just said, the colored boys, all that, was not a quote. You will not find any document with that quote in it. So she ends it by saying, call it what you will, they were not welcome in the league, period. That is not a history lesson. That is editorializing. Go ahead, let's keep playing. Play the rest.
Just like that, one by one, those men were erased from the rosters, taking with them the brief history of the black athlete and the National Football League.
So they depict it almost like Thanos snapping the Infinity Gauntlet. They all just dissolve into dust and float away. They just dissolve into dust and float away because the evil white men in their smoke-filled rooms, smoking their cigars, laughing, said, no more colored boys are allowed in the league. Again, not an exact quote, but you can call it what you want. Well, no, if you're going to actually broadcast this to millions of people, you should depict it accurately. Now, there's no doubt that the people who took over the NFL at that time were very racist. I mean, that happened in America. There were people who believed that if you had black skin, you were inferior to white people. A horrible part of our history. And there's no doubt that there were owners at that time who didn't want African Americans to play in the league. But that video you just saw, where they count them, they had 3 black players dissolve into dust and float away. So they're kicked out of the league. Isn't accurate. So that decision was made, allegedly, the backroom deal that she discusses, was made in 1933. At that time, there were only 2 African Americans left in the league. One's name was Joe Lillard. The other was Ray Kemp. Now, both were gone by the end of that season. But Lillard was let go officially because he kept getting into fights. Yes, he was responsible for almost half of his team's points that year. But he was let go because he wouldn't stop fighting with people on the field, in the locker room, and outside of the organization. He was let go because he was fighting. The other person, Ray Kemp, voluntarily quit to become a coach. And he had a very good coaching career. So when she says that these evil white men were in this back room smoking these big stogies, just scheming to turn black players into dust, the consequences of that alleged backroom discussion resulted in 2 African-American players leaving the league. One because he wouldn't stop punching people, and the other one left voluntarily to become a coach. So just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. Welcoming on now Mr. Joe Altman. Welcome to the show. Talking about Super Bowl wokeness. We'll ask you a question that I asked everyone else. If you had no idea about America, you knew nothing about America, and you watched the full Super Bowl coverage, and you had to put a number on it, what would you guess? If the only knowledge you had about America was what you watched of the Super Bowl, pre, during, and post-game, what would your guess be for what percentage African Americans make up of the country?
70%. I mean, it actually reminded me, and I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East and Africa, it reminded me of some of the commercializations we saw over in that region, right? That there was a low, look, this is the racism. This is what racism looks like. If you want to know what racism looks like, you want to know what division looks like, you want to know about segregation looks like, and actually going back in time, that's what we're actually doing right now. This is the epitome of what racism looks like. And I'm going to tell you what happens as a result of that. Race wars become more prevalent and people die. And so people start seeing this perception, this optics that they actually put out there that creates devils. And the problem with creating devils is that you create more resentment, and through that resentment comes even a larger degree of what we're experiencing right now, which is a degradation of our society. It's really sad, actually. And I actually watched some of the Super Bowl, and because I was at a friend's house, and he said, "Hey, look, I'm going to watch the Super Bowl," and I was like, "I'm not watching it." He said, "Just come over, we'll have some food and we'll relax a little bit." And so I did, and I got 2 minutes into it and listened to the commercials and listened to what they were saying, and I was just disgusted. I was disgusted by the ideological propaganda that was being thrown at us, as if we have to swallow it. It reminded me of the Tide Pod challenge. That's what it reminded me of.
Oh.
Right? That people actually ate Tide Pods because somewhere along the line they thought it was a good idea. Right? This type of things is just like Tide Pods, just as dangerous. Yeah. And by the way, it produces the same result, which is people dying or being hurt because of the propaganda that's actually pushed out there. And the Jeep commercial was even the worst. I don't know if you guys actually saw that.
We're going to get to that.
It was disgusting.
We're going to get to that. People on DLive are saying earlier when I mentioned that there were between 13 and 14% of the country is black, they're saying, well, 50% of the NFL is black. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the country as a whole. Because obviously, yeah, sure, it's Black History Month. And this doesn't bother me. I'm interested in why they decided to do this. Why every company seemed to want to go woke. Why every company was just like into that. I'm very curious about it.
Well, I don't know if you saw the article, the Time Magazine article, which talked about the cabal that was actually created between big business and the trade unions, right? So the actual unions.
Yeah.
It said the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. So, and I'm sorry I'm late. I've been working on what most people here are probably interested in at some point, which is what are we doing with the IPO? I'm actually, I can give you an update at the very end if you care to have an update, but I've been working on that, and I got a little sidetracked until Josh is like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? So here I am. Go ahead, Max.
So, Mr. Brewster, I just sent you over a YouTube video one I forgot to pull for today. This one, I almost forgot about as I'm thinking in my head going through all the commercials. This one stuck out at me too. The M&M's commercial. M&M's commercial. The whole premise of the M&M's commercial is you give someone a pack of M&M's when you want to say you're sorry.
Yeah. Max just...
For mansplaining.
Yeah.
For mansplaining. So, Mr. Producer, let me know when that's ready to go. I just sent you that YouTube video.
It's ready.
Okay, so let's go ahead and play this M&M's commercial apologizing for mansplaining. Let's go ahead and play it.
I feel bad for kicking your seat on purpose.
I'm sorry for mansplaining. That's when a man...
I know what it is. We should have just told you it's a boy.
I wish you didn't have to hear all that.
Sorry I called you Karen.
That's my name.
Sorry your name is Karen.
I promise I will not eat any more of your friends.
Really?
Okay, it might happen one more time.
I cut it. So, some funny bits of it. Anyone who's ever been to a gender reveal, I'm sorry, I should have just told you it was a boy. But the so close to the beginning, I'm sorry for mansplaining. Mansplaining isn't a thing. Mansplaining is, to anyone who doesn't know, because they actually cut him off from explaining it, and by claiming that would itself be mansplaining. Mansplaining is the notion that if anytime a man explains something to a woman and assumes they don't know it, it's because for whatever reason they believe they don't know it because they're a woman and they need a man to explain it to them. And what the left has done is anytime a man tries to explain anything, they say, oh, that's mansplaining. Well, no, sometimes I just want to explain something, right? The idea that just explaining details is somehow a microaggression. They slip it right in. What do you think of that, Joe? What do you think of the mansplaining?
So I got more subliminal out of that than that.
Yeah?
I got more out of it than that. I got the fact that, and this coming from a guy that my family is interracial, right? And so I was an athlete. So all my life I've been an athlete. I still am an athlete. I still play football on Saturdays, right? In a league that's downtown. I've taken care of myself, right? And who they picked to be those roles of the white people. And actually, two of my friends actually called me and they're like, dude, they make white people look weak. What's wrong, Joe? You're a little weak. And I laughed and I was like, yeah, it's crazy. You have some little, I don't know, metrosexual or something saying bleep bleep, I won't eat the M&M. And and I look at it and go, oh my gosh, they're not trying to build equality. They're trying to build the perception of inequality, right?
Yeah.
Superiority or inferiority. And so I have more of an issue with what optically or mentally they're trying to teach people.
They make a decision to highlight certain body builds. I mean, anyone who's ever sat in these kinds of meetings, they storyboard the hell out of these commercials.
Right.
And everything has a purpose. Everything has a demographic. Everything has a focus group that's testing. Well, because they're spending millions of dollars on this ad. Yes, they're going to focus group test whether or not it's better to have a boy or a girl as the main character. They do all that, right? But I mean, there's lots of. I mean, just look at the part where the guy's leaving the confessional in the Catholic Church, apologizing for what he just had to tell the priest. I mean, that's a dig on Catholics. That's a dig on the religious. As apparently that he has to apologize for what he just confessed for. Everything in there has a purpose, and everything in there has to get greenlit before it can make it anywhere close to final production. We're gonna skip over the Jeep one. I'll play that towards the end. But did you see the Fiverr ad?
No, I didn't see it. I mean,
so do you remember?
I will tell you, at some point in it, I had enough. Right?
Yeah,
I had enough.
So, do you remember after the election when the Trump campaign had a press conference? They said they were going to have a press conference at Four Seasons, and apparently then they realized that they couldn't have it at the hotel. They realized they had to have it somewhere else, so they went to Four Seasons Landscaping to hold their election fraud press conference. Who thought that was a good idea? I have no clue. It's in a weird strip mall right next to a store that sells sex toys. Like, who thought that that's where Rudy Giuliani should give his speech? No idea. I imagine that it's because they told everyone Four Seasons couldn't book the Four Seasons, had to find Four Seasons gardening, landscaping. Fiverr did an ad about that company having new opportunities to make money by now being a place where press conferences are held. Let's go ahead and play cut number 5.
Looks good, guys. Success! It's often right place, right time. When opportunity knocks at your corrugated garage door, you roll that puppy up. Fiverr gets that. From graphic design to web development. Or even a PR expert for things like, I don't know, booking a press conference. The freelancers to get you where you want to be.
Ma! We found a 5th season!
Is this a lobby? This is not a hotel.
So, that entire Super Bowl commercial's premise was making fun of the Trump campaign for having a press conference at Four Seasons Landscaping. The entire premise was anti-Trump. Entire premise. And that was a Super Bowl commercial. Advertising to people in business who need to hire other people to do jobs, to web design, things like that. Something that you would think you wouldn't want to just go against Trump on.
There's an underpinning to it that somewhere along the line that, and again, it just is weak, right? I mean, you just look at the weakness. You look at what they're trying to do to personify different races, right? And nobody has ever called me in my entire life has ever called me weak. Never. Yet when you see these commercials, they're designed. And look, I used to have a problem when they portrayed black men as criminals all the time. I used to tell my wife, I used to tell my friends, like, you want to know that they're actually, creating this like gang mentality for black men, for kids growing up. Hey, you can grow up and be this, right? I used to have a problem with that too. I have a problem with how they start to create different personality types or stigmas on people, individually.
But that's not what this is. This is a company deciding
there's
to buy
more to
an
it, though.
entire
Just
Super Bowl ad
look at who
to
they
make
have in
fun
it.
of the former president.
Yeah.
Like, that's a woman driving a Tesla truck, making fun of the president for having a press conference there, and saying that, well, he had a press conference here, so now we have more money.
Yeah.
It's not a race issue. That's just
But
making fun of conservatives at their expense.
Inside of what they do in Hollywood is all designed to indoctrinate people into the future.
Yeah. I mean, imagine a Super Bowl ad after Donald Trump wins a Super Bowl ad in 2017, making fun of Hillary Clinton's post-election press conference.
Right.
That would never fly.
No.
That would never fly.
No.
That's essentially what this is. It's making fun of.
And just so you know,
politics where it doesn't need to be.
They can't move on from anything because that's all they have is hate.
Yeah.
That's all they have is hate, right? And so now that Know Nothing, illegitimate Biden is in a seat, right? They can't talk about him because he's an empty shell of a human being, right? And then you can't talk about Kamala because she's a zero. And you can't talk about the administration as far as who they put in different positions because they're destroying people's jobs and taking away industry and doing everything to screw up basically our way of life as Americans. So they can't talk about that because then they'd have to bring it to light to the American people, which the American people are feeling it. They're feeling it, but they can't bring that to light because we don't want to bring that to light. We want to make sure we hide as much as we can from the American people. So instead, they build propaganda and then they take it to Hollywood and they take it to these different companies. And they try to convince Americans that you're different than what you are. And that if you are different, then there's something to be, it's bad, right? So.
Yeah. Last year, they didn't let conservative organizations, do any advertising. They didn't let them. They blocked ads from being shown.
Well, they did mostly this year too. Yeah,
and I don't care if that's the owner of Four Seasons. I get that they're making light of it, but to air something in the Super Bowl that directly brings in a Philadelphia press conference about election fraud, and makes a joke about it, it's so incredibly tone deaf.
They're scumbags.
So incredibly.
You're talking about trash. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the radical left represents trash. They're trash. Oh, by the way, Coomer made it to YouTube before me. So what's up, Coomer? How you doing, trash bucket? Oh, you and probably your lawyers too. One of the two.
So the one that everyone's talking about is the Jeep commercial. Joe, have you seen the Jeep commercial as a Jeep owner?
I was disgusted. I almost sold my Jeep. Right. I literally went outside and almost Molotov cocktailed my own Jeep.
Well, that would be bad.
Okay, I probably didn't do that because if you ever saw my Jeep, you'd be like, "Whoa, Joe, you can't do that to your Jeep."
Yeah.
Have you seen what I did to my Jeep?
I think you could make it a little bit cooler, but we'll take that offline.
I think we should ask people if they think it's cool.
I don't like the look of the hard top over the bed of the Jeep truck. I like it better with the hard top just over the riding area and leaving the bed open. But to each their own. The Jeep commercial.
I'm sending it to Josh. He's going to show everybody my Jeep.
The Jeep commercial was put out there by and it starred Bruce Springsteen. It is 2 minutes long, but we're going to play it in its entirety because it is 100% virtue signaling, and it's 100% trying to make people forget that for the past 4 years, the left has been trying to drag this country apart. Let's go ahead and play cut number 4.
There's a chapel in Kansas, standing on the exact center of the lower 48. It never closes. All are more than welcome to come meet here in the middle. It's no secret. The middle has been a hard place to get to lately. Between red and blue, between servant and citizen, between our freedom and our fear. Now, fear has never been the best of who we are. And as for freedom, it's not the property of just the fortunate few. It belongs to us all. Whoever you are, wherever you're from. It's what connects us. And we need that connection. We need the middle. We just have to remember the very soil we stand on is common ground. So we can get there. We can make it to the mountaintop, through the desert, and we will cross this divide. Our light has always found its way through the darkness. And there's hope on the road up ahead.
Let's cut it.
Hey, I got a Jeep for sale.
The Reunited America.
I got a Jeep for sale. Put my Jeep up.
It's for sale.
Put it up. My Jeep is now for sale. Those are 37-inch wheels and tires. Yeah, it's got a 3-inch lift kit on it. It's got a topper. My Jeep is now for sale. But it is only for sale to a loony leftist because I am no longer going to have a Jeep. I wouldn't sell it to any of you.
I love it.
Mm-mm.
So put it back up, Mr. Producer.
Man, you better not say anything bad about my truck. Come on, 'cause it's still my truck right now.
I know.
I just want to be clear.
What are you storing in the truck bed?
What am I storing it? I better take my dogs in the truck bed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I got dog beds back there.
Typically, when people do that to their truck, they have tools, they have stuff that they store there so they can lock it.
Yeah, my dogs.
I don't know. I've never liked the look of just always driving around with it. If you need it
come on.
I like the look a lot
What?
better with it taken off. Yeah, I
Get
like
out
it.
of here.
I like it better with it taken off.
You can say whatever you want, but that truck is pretty sexy. Yeah, sell it
It's a little
to.
bit like
Hey, More Than White Noise said sell it to Coomer. Nah, he can't. He won't be able to afford it by the time we're done.
It looks a little bit. Yeah, it's fine. To each his own. I like the soft top better personally, but
you say whatever you want. I love that truck, and now I got to sell it. I got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I just now. Man, see, they've just ruined it for me. What am I reuniting with, by the way? What am I reuniting with? Am I reuniting with hate? Am I reuniting with reuniting?
Well, we're no, don't sing that. Don't sing that. Stop it.
I stopped.
Yeah, but you sang enough.
I did not,
You only need to sing a couple
actually.
seconds. So, Bruce Springsteen is a rabid leftist. Mr. Producer, put up my screen. This was Bruce Springsteen, January 22nd, 2017. So 2 days after Donald Trump's inauguration. Bruce Springsteen saying, the new resistance against Trump has begun, calling on the entire world to resist Donald Trump. Here we are in the same situation.
I want to punch him in the throat.
And he wants everyone just to be reunited. Oh, where'd that come from? That's my Jeep. Looks a lot better than yours. Just wanted to. Bruce Springsteen is trying to make us all forget that he just 4 years ago was literally trying to drive a wedge in the country. Resist, resist, resist. Now Joe Biden is in office and he's saying, "Oh no, well now we're reuniting."
Hey, let me ask everybody a question. If under Democrats there's an erosion of minority communities and the wealthier get more wealthy and Hollywood makes more money, why do you think that they support Biden? He's not for America. He's not for minorities. They're not for minorities. They want to destroy the minority community. They have weakened education. Yeah. They have removed the ability for some people to get access to health care. Oh, you say, oh, no, they have Medicaid. No. Medicaid is a wait your turn. Perfect example.
Yeah.
Guy that used to work here, right? His mom had severe problems, right? I'm not going to say who it is. She was on Medicaid, right? And she had cancer. And they said, yeah, we'll give you your cancer treatment in May.
Wow.
She had stage 4 cancer. They'll give it to you in May. She died 3 weeks later. Never even gave her a chance to get on that.
Yeah.
That right there is what oppression looks like. That's what equality to the left looks like. It's, on the surface, it looks like we're giving you something. But they're not.
Not.
If you look at the education environment in Democrat-controlled environments, it's awful. And you're talking about areas that are 70, 80, 90% minority. And they don't even provide you with proper education. They're too busy talking to you about indoctrination. They're too busy talking to you about social justice. They miss math, science, civics, simple stuff. That the only thing that a school should actually be teaching you, which is simple math, the stuff that you need in order to provide for your family. But they took all that away, and now they want to sell you on social justice. They want to sell you on gender identity. They want to sell you on all of these things. They want to take the responsibility away from the parents and say, no, it's our responsibility to raise your kids. I mean, just think about how sick you would have to be to think that an educational institution, that their number one priority is to weaken the constitution of the mind of young people in minority-controlled communities. I want you to think about that. They say Democrats are, it's the brand, it's the political party for the less fortunate. How? They literally are making you weak. They're making you weak. They're creating something in your mind that doesn't exist. Well, by the way, they're pointing over here.
Ads were.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's nuts.
All the ads were designed to teach you, to have you look at the world in a certain way. So instead of the ads being designed to sell you a product, the ads this year, and there were some that were very good. As I mentioned, I love the Doritos ad. There were ads designed to force upon you a way of thinking that we are now reunited, and anyone who doesn't agree with reuniting is the one trying to drive us apart. Well, no, Bruce Springsteen, you don't get to claim for 4 years that Donald Trump is an illegitimate president and you are resisting him, and then the minute he's out of office say, oh, now it's time to reunite the country.
Yep.
It doesn't work like that.
He's trash.
It just doesn't work like that.
The radical left, they're trash. They're trash. They're trash because they don't care about you. See, I fight for people that are less fortunate. I actually put my money where my mouth is. Where's their money where their mouth is? Where? By the way, I went and looked up a couple of the nonprofits that some of these companies have. And I looked at the, whatever it is, the I don't think it's a 990 or whatever, the form that they have for their nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to tell you who they are, but maybe we should actually come out here and show people. I think I will, actually. But one of the line items was pay. So they put money into this nonprofit. People pay into this nonprofit. And then the line item coming out was nearly $1 million to a family member of the person that started the nonprofit. And this is someone, by the way, in Hollywood. So I just started going down the line and looking at these different organizations. You see these large line items. You trace them back, and they're bilking money out of American people out of millions of dollars. And some people give $5, $10, $20, $30, think it's going to something good, but it doesn't. It goes right back into their own pockets. It's another way for them to basically shrink the opportunity of those in their environment by using rhetoric and propaganda and telling them that those guys over there are bad. Please tell me how many Republicans there are in Chicago. Tell me how many Republicans there are in Detroit. Tell me how many Republicans there are in places like LA or Washington, D.C. or New York City. Close your eyes and what do you see? That's how many there are. But they're so busy yelling that inequality, that people they get fixated on the fact that somebody's stabbing me. It must be the Republicans because that's what they're telling me. And I was told to be a Democrat. Stab, 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 stab. While their younger sister or younger brother gets stabbed or shot on the street trying to get to school, where the school system is so degraded that the only thing that they can do is just hold on as best they can and hope that they get to a 10th grade education by the time they graduate. See, the Democrats don't stand for anything. They're disgusting. The whole organization has been hijacked. And here's another thing you should understand. The words, and you and I used to get in arguments about Black Lives Matter, right? And I was like, to me, Black lives do matter. They matter in everything that I do. But the Black Lives Matter organization, it 100%. And it's been hijacked by communists and socialists. And people would say, oh, Joe, you're so wrong. Really? Well, let me ask everyone a question. It's a simple question. In 1983, there was a bombing where someone tried to basically bomb, true story, the Senate building to kill Republicans. Do you know when that was? Max?
No, I don't know the exact year now.
But it was 1983. Now, there was a person in 1983. Everyone could fact check me. You fact check me to death on this. But there was a person responsible for that was actually sentenced to prison. Do you remember that?
It's true. Yeah, and she's now at the head of Black Lives Matter.
The head of Black Lives Matter. She's a communist. Her name is Susan Rosenberg. And on November 7th, 1983, as a part of the Communist Party, they detonated a bomb in the Senate in an attempt to kill Republicans. Does anybody here think some insurrection happened when you have them basically opening the doors, saying, here, come on in, right? That's an insurrection. Do you have any idea what happened to Susan Rosenberg? Anybody want to guess? Anybody want to guess? What?
She got pardoned.
She got pardoned by who?
Bill Clinton. No, was it
Bill Clinton?
I think it was Bill Clinton, yeah.
It was Bill Clinton. I want you to think about that. Now, a couple weeks ago, we put up a thing on Susan Rosenberg. I thought it was an interesting thing that we should probably discuss. I wanted to hear, personally, how Snopes was going to fact check what actually happened in 1983.
And they just said
I'm sorry. Happen. It was Obama that actually.
Oh, Obama. That makes more sense.
No, I think it was Clinton. Here, I could check it. You could check it while I'm going through this. But there's a thing that I'm going to put up. I'm going to have I'll have you put it up. That was fact checked by Snopes, and I'm sending it over to Josh right now. And the thing was, it asked whether or not this person, Susan, was actually a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Mm-hmm. And whether or not she was this terrorist, Susan Rosenberg. Do you have any idea how they answered that?
Saying she's not a real terrorist.
Why?
I don't know.
Tell us. And this is fascinating to me because I was like, wait a minute, that can't be true. Josh, go ahead and put that up. I put it up on your, there it is. I see it. Yeah, if you could just put that up for me. So the question was asked, was Susan Rosenberg a terrorist? And there's a mixture of what's true. So here's what's true. It says, is she involved in the Black Lives Matter movement? And is the terrorist, Susan Rosenberg, a part of it? So I'm going to read this to you. So this is what Snopes says. Susan Rosenberg has served as vice chair of the board of directors for 1,000 Currents, an organization that provides fundraising and fiscal sponsorship for the Black Lives Matter global movement. She was an active member of revolutionary left-wing movements whose illegal activities included bombing U.S. government buildings and committing armed robberies. What's undetermined? Now keep in mind, they're saying that part of this is true, check mark, and it's untrue, X, right? What's undetermined? Yeah. In the absence of a single universally agreed definition of quote-unquote terrorism, it is a matter of subjective determination as to whether the actions for which Rosenberg was convicted and imprisoned, possession of weapons and hundreds of pounds of explosives, should be described as acts of domestic terrorism, quote-unquote. Listen, this is how nuts the left is. This is how disgusting they are.
No. You want to know how nuts the left is, Mr. Producer?
No,
put
this
up my
is
screen.
Disgusting.
We had insurrection last night at the Super Bowl. Talk about nuts. This guy ran on the screen on the field. Apparently, that's the new definition of an insurrection. Anytime someone enters an area they're not supposed to be on. This is the streaker who ran onto the field. He was asking for tickets. Anyone who had an extra ticket, he promised if they gave it to him, he would streak onto the field. And oh yeah, that's my Jeep. It's still nicer than yours.
It's not nicer than mine. I want everybody to think about this as I want Coomer and his little band of idiots that are actually on YouTube. I want you guys to think about this. You represent the evil of our society. You have a terrorist and the organizations that you have all the way down line stand for terrorism. They stand for evil. So I already know that some of you are Satanists. I already know some of you that associate with this leftist wokeism are absolute evil crap bags. We already know that. But this is what you associate with. You associate with people who try to kill other people. That's what you associate with. That, by the way, never gets any traction. You want to know why? Because the left owns the media. Do you wonder why we're out there building new technology? And with the meetings I'm having, we're close to it. Big tech won't survive this. It won't survive it. See, the pendulum's already swinging back, and it's swinging back really, really hard. Because these young people are like, what are you talking about? I'm not a racist. There's no racism here. By the way, why is unions telling us what we have to believe or not believe? Why are they bringing gender fluidity into our schools? The conversations I had this weekend with young people, they're like, yeah, nobody believes that. It's all garbage. Yet we have an entire generation, a small gap where parents did not know what their kids were being taught. They're now being taught and recruited to be a part of the quote unquote LGBTQ MOBC movement.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's true. And they're trying to distract us while behind the scenes they're doing things that are just completely unconstitutional.
Right.
For the first hour, we had Todd on, Bensman, and we were talking about just how horrible Biden's executive orders on the border, his border policy, how horrible the executive orders are, and how it's just resulting in people streaming across the border. We have no idea who they are. We can't vet them. We can't possibly vet them. In the Congress today, you have Republicans and Democrats negotiating on what the impeachment trial will look like. Republicans, instead of Republicans fighting to shut the impeachment trial down and say it's unconstitutional, he has a First Amendment free speech right to give that speech on the National Mall. You can't criminalize him for it, and it's unconstitutional for the United States Senate to try a private citizen. Right? It's very unconstitutional. Instead of that, like, they're just shoving the wokeness down our throats. It's so aggravating. And at some point, something's got to give. Something's got to give because...
You know what's got to give? People have to wake the F up. They have to wake up. People have to wake up and say, these are absolute terrorists. They're terrorists. The radical left represents terrorism. They are terrorists. They're not maybe terrorists. They're terrorists. This Rosenberg is free, working with BLM, and she's a communist.
Yeah.
She tried to kill people. Just so you know, black men with 2 ounces of marijuana got a longer sentence than she did.
Yeah.
True story. And what does it tell you when Bill Clinton, in 2001, it was Bill Clinton, on his last day in office, commutes a sentence of a terrorist?
Yeah.
What does it tell you about Democrats?
Tells you about their priorities.
We can actually commute the sentence of a white woman who stands for communism. That's what they did. They commuted the sentence of a white woman. Let's call what it is. They commuted the sentence of a white woman working for communism who comes out and works for the Black Lives Matter movement. Again, designed to do the thing where I'm working for you. I'm trying to take care of you. Let's go raise some money. Yeah. Let's go do some stuff to help with this movement that Black Lives Matter. Where do they matter? Yeah. Well, show me where they matter. Show me where you've reduced the number of deaths in Chicago. You know what drives me nuts about this little crap bag Coomer? You know what drives me crazy about him?
I imagine a lot of things. What?
He's a white, upper class crap bag who knows nothing about being in an impoverished community. Nothing.
Okay.
And he's out there basically saying on his pages that oh yeah, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, right? He's creating this chaos of something he never lived through. I did. I lived through it. And you wonder why I have a balanced view of racism. Like, I know it exists, but I also know how to avoid it. I know how to walk away from it. I know how to hold people accountable for being racist. I don't call everybody racist. I call the people that are racist. I attack them at the core. But I don't go walking around saying, oh my gosh, there's a boogeyman in every closet. Because I know what it does is it provides an excuse why people in those communities cannot have success. But you have crap bags like Susan Rosenberg running around really under the guise of communism, and that's what the left stands for, and yet we're supposed to feel like they help minorities. Where? Tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me how you help minorities when you actually bring people illegal into the country and split resources. How? They don't care about you. Democrats don't care about minorities. They don't care.
Definitely not. Definitely they don't outside of election years. We just received a fact check on our Facebook comment section from Susan. Miss Producer, put up my screen. Susan says that that's not an insurrectionist. That's just an erectionist. And Susan, you're absolutely correct. I misspoke. In that case, it actually is an erectionist. And, oh, by the way, Jeeps look better in soft tops.
No. This is clearly the best truck out of them all. Thank you very much.
No, that's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
That looks like you spray painted it. Did you spray paint it?
You're going to find another producer here soon. That's all I got to say.
I want everyone to understand why I'm so upset about what we're dealing with. Why was I willing to give up my position, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year? I go down the line. Why was I willing to give up those things? I'll tell you why. Because a lie today is the same as a lie was yesterday. And if we allow these lies to continue, we will do nothing but oppress and push down minority communities while blaming white people for it. And then they'll say, I can't help you, as they're stabbing them in the side. They're not creating opportunity. They're creating a dream around going and being an athlete like the gladiators of the past. Here, just go be a gladiator. Put your body on the line. CTE, don't worry about that. It's okay. We'll give you millions of dollars so you can spend it in the marketplace. Just go. Where, was it, 85 or 90% of pro athletes, of black men and women that are pro athletes, end up leaving that profession broke. Yeah. It's not my stat, it's theirs. Maybe it's 92%. It doesn't matter what it is. They do everything they can to prop up the symbol of what you can become. And that symbol is never, hey, go be a doctor. Go help people. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. Out of all the time that I spent over in the Middle East and Africa, in Africa specifically, I would go into these villages where they would have doctors without borders. And 99.5% of the time, this is my experience, they were white doctors that were there. And predominantly, 55 to 60% were women. But they're there to help. Why? Like, why did I work there? I worked there because they were my brothers and sisters. I loved the people in Africa. I loved the people in the Middle East. I loved them. I love the people that we have here. I go and speak truth on my Facebook page and Parler when it comes back up. And we go through this, and I just say it, and people come railing back at me in private and like, Joe, how do you talk about God and spew hate? I go, tell me what hate I spewed. Tell me. Well, you said radical left and that they're pedophiles, rapists, and closet racists. And I said, because they are. And they're liars too. So where's the hate? Because I think they're a bunch of lying scumbags? That's what they are. They're liars. Let's call them what they are. Let's stop using the word, but that's not factually accurate. No, they're liars. And they're destroying minority communities. Destroying it. And they're allowing kids that go to a college or a high school that, frankly, they can barely read, barely write, because they came from an inner city, and they're trying to prop it up and say, look, it's because they don't have an opportunity. No, it's because you guys have screwed up the entire system. Because you care more about the teacher in that environment than the education for those kids. They want to keep us hungry as people. Right? Just give you just enough hope. Just enough people that you can actually prop them up to show you that it's possible. While they build a pedigree of people to become billionaires, they prop them up. You know, Robert Smith got attacked. Robert Smith is a billionaire black man. And frankly, I've read all about him. The IRS came after him viciously, almost $1 billion. They took from him in the IRS under threat that they would arrest him. You can't make this stuff up. And he did it by himself, just kind of pushing hard. He paid off people's student loans for a college, for an entire graduating class, right? And the thanks that he gets back with is the IRS just attacking him viciously because it wasn't their pick. They didn't pick him as the black billionaire. He picked himself. And if you go back through history in his environment, he's got an amazing story, but he's not their pick. How dare you actually become successful? I'm telling you, the system is rigged against minorities. But not only is that, it's rigged against the lower class. That if you spin that wheel and you happen to win the lottery, because that's the equivalent of getting out of that environment. It's like winning the lottery. 1 in a million gets out of that environment and finds success. 1 in a million. But they want to create more chaos in that environment and blame it on white people. I don't get it. Maybe there are white people that are bad, and they're all in the Democrat Party.
No, I think there are white people that are bad. I think that
100%.
I think that's true. I think no one would say that there isn't. Just this whole idea that Joe Biden's president, and that means that we no longer have to even have an argument over whether we live in a completely racist society. We're just going to go with it. That's insane. Like, that's insanity to me. Like,
Well,
Joe Biden won, so that
he
means
didn't.
everything we've been saying that was completely
that's it.
disputed. Everything we've been saying that was completely disputed, we're just going to stop disputing it, and you're just going to have to accept it because we're the reunited United States. And if you dare disagree, that makes you a bigot, xenophobe, any kind of ism you want to throw at it. Well, I will confess that I zoned out here a little bit to find pictures of my Jeep, and when I rezoned
Don't
back
put 'em
in,
up.
I have
Do not share your
no.
Do not share
I'm
your
just saying
screen.
that over the course,
Do not share your screen.
I was finding pictures of my Jeep. I zoned out for what felt like a minute, and when I came back, we had shifted from Super Bowl commercials to like racism, which is fine. I just I can't zone out anymore, especially. Well, it was a good reason because my Jeep is obviously superior, but I zone out for a minute and we start going in a different direction, which is fine. Which is fine. I just had to kind of circle back and listen to you a little bit.
You had to circle back?
I circle back. I'm going to circle back to the circle back.
Well,
and by the time I circle back, we're already circling back.
I want you to see something because I think it's really important for you to see this. So out of all the cars that we have, nothing is as cool as the one that I actually happened to see as I was driving down the street.
Is this a picture of your car getting towed? Your Jeep?
My Jeep is not getting towed. So go ahead and put this up. This was an awesome thing that I saw on the highway. It's actually really cool. I was driving. I looked over and I was like, "What is that?" So it's just 3 seconds. Yeah. So all right, play it. Here we go. There we go. There's a thing.
I don't know what that is.
That's a Volkswagen thing. That's actually a thing. I mean, if you're curious, here it is. One more time. Just one more time. There you go. And he's like, "Hi, how you doing?"
Before seatbelts were mandatory?
Yeah, way before seatbelts were mandatory. Yeah. Listen, Max, I know I got off on this tangent, but I'm
That's fine.
I'm completely pissed off about a lot of things right now. But I'm also not so pissed off that I can't have joy in my life. And I want everybody that's listening to understand that. Look, we're going to win this. We're going to win it. It's really simple. We're going to win this. We're going to get back to a place of sensibility. We're going to show the left what they are, but we have to continue to call them what they are. Right? They're pedophiles, rapists, and closet racists. And liars.
I had to end with that.
I did
there's liars. There's a fourth? There's a fourth?
Liars. Yeah, they're definitely liars. But if we
put
actually
together T-shirts. We're gonna get T-shirts.
Yes. Yeah.
We're gonna get T-shirts, and it's just gonna say those 3 words. Well, it's gonna say Democrats are.
Democrats are. Yeah.
Who
would buy one of those?
I always get
Come on, show me
I
the
always
comments.
Get it messed up. Yeah, I always get it messed up, and I say child racists, which isn't true. I always get a little tongue tied with it. But we're gonna put together shirts, and see how the shirts sell. And if they sell well, Joe, you can keep saying it. If they don't sell well, it might be time
Hey, Randy
to retire.
says I like Joe's Jeep better than Max's. Of course he'd read that one. Yeah. We should do a survey on here of who likes whose Jeep better. I think it's
what about the comment section
Yeah.
that says it's obvious that Josh needs a raise by the picture of his car.
So is that really there? No, he does not need a raise.
He came off my phone.
No, but I will tell. Yeah, so yeah, do it like a Jeopardy question. Who has the better Jeep, Joe or Max?
We'll ask everyone tomorrow.
Yeah,
we'll do a poll on it tomorrow to make sure we get the entire listener base watching it. But it's interesting. It's amazing how this is quite telling. Like we got a little bit sidetracked on the conversation, but it's amazing that just talking about Super Bowl commercials can even segue into talking about racial divide. Like the Super Bowl there should be no segue there. Like it should not be possible to talk about a Jeep commercial and smoothly transition to racism in America. It shouldn't be. It never used to be that way.
No, it shouldn't.
It never used to be that way. And it's really depressing that this is the state of the country we live in, where not only the politicians believe that it's okay, but now the corporations believe that it's worth it to spend their money on these Super Bowl ads to grandstand, right? To push wokeism, to just push all this leftist nonsense. Very, very sad that they think that it's a worthwhile endeavor, that they think it'll actually earn them money. And it's a shame that we have let it get this far, right? Because this wasn't an overnight thing. They've been pushing the envelope for a long time, and we're just finally seeing that now they feel comfortable with going full woke in the Super Bowl. Well,
But
that's going to be it for this edition.
It's not fully woke. I mean, I just want to be really clear. It's not fully woke. It's the 10% that are trying to basically indoctrinate everyone else and say maybe if you just say it enough, they'll tire. We cannot tire, and you cannot give this fight up. You can't. Like it took 70 years to get here. It only takes a couple years to go back. We got to get back to sensibilities. We got to get back to a place. And they know, by the way, that we're close to grabbing it back. That's why they're suppressing all the new evidence that came out and the proof that came out from Lindell and others. They're literally just trying everything they can to keep the genie in the bottle. Stop it, but they can't, because truth matters, and liars never prevail.
Well, right before we end, Mr. Bruce, you go to my screen. Robert just posted in the comment section that he didn't see my Jeep, so he wanted to make sure he saw it.
Why? Then put mine back up.
That is the sweet.
All right.
Joe, yours looks like a United Nations vehicle.
Put mine back up. Put mine back up. Put it back up. Guys, you got to see mine. See, tell me that's
Joe
not.
Looks like he's about to roll into Rwanda with that. Blue helmet.
Yeah.
The blue helmet.
I'll drive it.
You guys are killing me.
So in the comment section, post your pick. # Joe's Jeep. # Max's Jeep.
# Joe's Jeep.
We'll do an official poll tomorrow. But go ahead.
Oh, let me do this. I need to give everybody an update on the IPO.
Okay, briefly.
Brief. Okay, so we've gotten all the pieces kind of put together. I'm flying out to another state I would tell you what state, but another state on Monday. I will be there for 2 days, and I'll have solidified the organizational structure to make sure that we can actually do this initial raise that we talked about before. And then from there, we'll acquire a technology company, and from that technology company acquisition, we'll have a public instrument that allows for us to raise the secondary raise, which will be $350 million, which is at that cap. And then from there, we'll just kind of move on. This is they're going to create institutional wealth. I hope that we have 80 million people on the cap table. I do hope that we actually get to a place where that this becomes one of the people, right? This becomes a company, organization of the people. But we're really close. We're probably 2 to 3 weeks out. My deadline was March 1st that I wanted to have this stuff situated, and I think we're on track to get that done. So it'll be the quickest turnaround I think I've ever done, and I'm really excited about where we're heading after this. So stay tuned. We are going to put out a landing page that will allow you to say, hey, look, I am interested, or I'm not interested. And last but not least, if you get a chance to support us in the fight that we have against the evil crapbag Coomer and Dominion, please do help us and support us. We plan on taking this a little bit further than I probably thought was necessary. But it's going to be a big fight, big fight.
One last bit.
Zach, I'm going to be up 30 days. He said April 1st. Yeah.
Just want to make sure everyone understands that is an American flag on the side of my Jeep, so I win for American flag points.
No,
absolutely.
You don't.
And that
You're
is
losing.
right on
You're
the hood.
losing.
Right on the hood.
Joe's Jeep. Joe wins.
Molan Labe, which is Greek for "come and take it," which is when Leonidas and the Spartans were told to put down their arms, and they said, "If you want to take away our weapons, you can come and take it." So I wear that proudly on my Jeep. Whereas Joe still has the stock Rubicon. Just want to make sure everyone understands.
That is not a stock Rubicon. That is not
No,
at all.
No, the sticker Rubicon sticker. And noticeable absence of American flag decals on.
It's on the back of the Jeep. Get out of here.
Noticeable absence.
Oh, guys, you can't let Max. You can't let Max win this one. You can't. You cannot. Take it down. Take his thing down, please. There we go. That's mine. No, don't go back.
Look at the stubby. Look at his antenna.
Look at how beautiful that is. That's right. That's a great antenna.
For ants? That's an antenna for ants?
Dude, take it down.
Size doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right.
It does when you're trying to pick up radio signals.
This is not working out. My Jeep's not. Mine has bigger wheels and tires than yours does.
Joe's just compensating for something. This is going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. If you like the podcast, make sure you sign up for the audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Podbean. We also go live Monday through Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and DLive. So make sure you like and follow our Facebook page, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube, and follow us on DLive. We're hoping that the text system will be back up and running soon. So, I don't think you can actually text in, but when it does, if you text the word freedom to 89517, you'll get added to the list. A link to join our email newsletter, make sure you do that. And as Joe mentioned, a link if you want to donate to help with our legal fees. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. My name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Oltman.
And remember, everyone, that the fight to take back our country isn't over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together.